Joining me now is Daniel Turner, the president and founder of Power the Future, and a frequent guest on our show because he provides such phenomenal insight into energy policies, environmental activism, what's going on with the greenies, what's going on with our government. Daniel, thanks for coming back.
Always great to be with you. Thanks for having me back.
So first off, happy Earth Day. It is the
Yes.
55th Earth Day, I think, in American and world history. How did you choose to celebrate today?
Well, I feel bad for the environmental left because climate change isn't the cool thing anymore. If you look at where the momentum of the leftist activists are, it's burning Teslas, it's El Salvador with MS-13 terrorists, right? It's in other places. The momentum, climate change is now just it's like an old person's cause. It's no longer cool. Now, granted, we are coming out of winter and we've had a fairly mild spring. I'm sure climate activism will pick up once we get our first heat wave. That's when they like to come out in force. But when one of the high priests of the climate movement, Bernie Sanders, when he's flying his private jets to stop oligarchy tour, you know that even he doesn't believe the climate footprint is real, climate change is real. So maybe climate activism is dying because the lies and the grift of the movement are being exposed more and more, and people are just moving away from it.
I'm old enough to remember when An Inconvenient Truth came out, and old enough to remember when one by one its different predictions were proven false. None of them actually took place. I remember when polar bears were the mascot of the climate, but then it turned out the problem was so many polar bears, they were struggling to find food, and that one was quietly dropped as well from the list of mascots. And I also remember a lot of young people who seem to be involved. But I walk through my neighborhood and I see some people in Old Town, Virginia, like to put out Halloween decorations, skeletons killed by climate change, but they're always in their 60s and 70s. It is definitely an older set. Has that movement really lost its credit with the youth? Have they picked up a hobby, or have they started caring about some other different kind of policy?
I mean, there's definitely an age perspective when it comes to Earth Day in particular, because it did start in 1970. And even a young Joe Biden back in the day would talk about how when I was a kid growing up in Scranton in the 60s and 70s, you could run your finger across the windshield and wipe the dirt off. And the planet was different in 1970. There's no doubt. Pollution was rampant. Littering was very common, right? When you had garbage, you threw it out the car window. We're not the same country as we were in the 1970s, and that could be a sign of good governance. It's a sign of good regulation. The problem with the climate movement is that it still tries to pretend it is 1970. It still tries to pretend that smokestacks are poisoning us, that coal and fossil fuels are dirty, and that groundwater pollution is killing us. And you hear these sort of bombastic phrases, fracking is killing whole communities, but yet you can't point to one, right? Yeah, people are dying from climate change, but no one has found a climate change casualty. So we're not the same planet we were 55 years ago, and that's a good thing. But the climate left has to convince us that we still live in this past. They're stuck in this era, kind of like Vietnam activists were stuck in that time period. Their hair, their clothing, their beard, their beads, their fringe and hippie clothing, they're still stuck in this time period that no longer exists. And we should see Earth Day as celebrating how far we've come thanks to fossil fuels and thanks to innovation, rather than be mired in this period that no longer exists.
Yeah, I remember the first, I wasn't there, but the first Earth Day, you had Richard Nixon, President of the United States, planting a tree in the White House lawn. It seemed like it was a somewhat bipartisan affair. What changed? When did that begin to shift from, were Republicans duped? I mean, to your point, the rivers in Pittsburgh were lighting on fire outside the steel mills. There were serious issues with the American environment. When did that start to shift from a movement that was set out to accomplish something and really did maybe help in some way to increase literacy of the environment and the effects of littering and the effects of pollution? into one that just needed more and more and more and wanted to gobble up American industry and put us out of jobs and take away our vehicles?
Yeah, that's a phenomena. It's a great question, and we could do hours about this. There is a phenomena that those who work in politics or in policy or in Washington, D.C. know that any group that has power and money will eventually be co-opted by the left. Any group, whether it's education, whether it's it's a testament to groups like Heritage Foundation and maybe the NRA that they haven't become hardcore lefty orgs, because every other organization, even libertarian ones, will eventually be co-opted by the left. And I think the climate
Even
movement
libertarians.
is an example of that. What was started with good bipartisan, we need to have better air and better water initiatives. I think leftists look at that and say there's money, there's power, there's influence, there's the chance to, if you're someone like Stacey Abrams, create an organization, get the IRS accreditation in 6 months, because we know the IRS commissioner, right? We're all friends. And suddenly I get a $2 billion grant, $2 billion grant. We talked about this last time I was on your program. $2 billion grant from the taxpayers for climate stuff. So that's when I think the movement disappeared, is when the left realizes they can co-opt anything, any cause, any issue, because of the money, the power, the influence. And that's kind of the history of communism writ large, right? They never create universities. They just infiltrate what you created. They poison it and destroy it from within. And they did the same to the climate movement.
Yeah, I feel like this was something that was championed by our late Pope, may he rest in peace. One of the most surreal and somewhat hurtful moments, I think, of his papacy was when he went to International Youth Day, just days after the latest round of awful reports from the 70s and 80s and 90s in the Pittsburgh diocese had come out, but dealing with some of the awful things that had happened. And his message to the children gathered was that the greatest threat to the future of this planet wasn't Satan, it wasn't war, it wasn't famine and pestilence. It was plastic in the oceans. This is around the time that we also had the moral panic over straws killing the turtles, apparently, which was eventually traced back to a kid's website. And the research was based on a number that he kind of extrapolated. Great on him for being such a go-getter, but it was a fake number. None of it was real. Even that seems to have ebbed a little bit. Is that another symptom of age, or is that just the changes that we've seen also in this country with the problems we've had with jobs and the focus of the American youth?
Yeah, I think the joys of having the climate boogeyman is that it is nameless, it's faceless, it's always evolving, it's never defeated. So you're always asking for more money and more resources, and you can fight this perpetual war forever. And sadly, when the Holy Father jumped onto that, he didn't attack China and India and Vietnam, which do poison the oceans with plastics. He called out, Western countries. Western countries are always flagellating themselves for the sins of Southeast Asia, which is the huge culpable factor in air pollution, in ocean pollution. Southeast Asia is where, if there is anything about climate change, it is all originating there. And yet we're constantly flagellating ourselves on the altar of climate change, and that movement is dying. I think the best thing Joe Biden did for this country is he showed them that 4 years of turbocharging the green agenda gave you high prices, an unstable grid, wealthier enemies, Russia, Iran, China. It gave us nothing. And that was 4 years. And we wasted trillions of dollars. And that was 4 years. Now, who's going to run on the climate agenda? I'm sure Pete Buttigieg will in a couple of years when he throws his hat in the ring. They'll all come back to the climate agenda because it's the perfect boogeyman. But do we want to go back to this agenda of more expensive goods, a weaker nation, stronger enemies? That's the only benefit of Joe Biden's administration, is he highlighted the pernicious nature of this death cult of the climate movement and how detrimental it is to your life, your liberty, and your property.
What are some of the lasting impacts of those 4 years and those trillions of dollars that were spent? I know that a lot of the infrastructure projects they attempted to accomplish, as you've come on to talk about, the contracts were never even fully executed, and the work was never actually realized because they couldn't find enough. I guess lesbian black solar panel builders to do the contracts or the recharge stations.
Yeah.
So just nothing happened. How much of that money spent and those organizations funded and that stuff out the door is having a lasting impact on America, charging the activist class, or has that damage been undone?
No, that damage is going to take a while to undo. I think this current administration and the Doge efforts have stopped a lot of the funding. They've shut off the spigot, so to say. But a lot of that money is already out the door, and what they're going to do with it, I guess we will see come the next election cycle. I'm sure a group like Stacey Abrams was going to educate the activists class about climate change by knocking on doors when it comes to John Ossoff's Senate reelection, right? And they would say, "Well, no, we're just educating constituents about climate change." They will use it for electoral and partisan purposes. So a lot of that money, sadly, has been spent. I think a lot of the damage that they did, which is ongoing, is they created this enormous culture now of distrust, more distrust in government institutions and government contracts, in government itself, right? When you give out hundreds of billions of dollars, trillions of dollars, a lot of Republicans are on the dole too. A lot of Republican governors were thrilled to get $100 million grants for wind turbines and solar panels. Now they're addicted to the drug. Right? Joe Biden gave them heroin, and now they want their next hit. And now you have Republicans out there fighting the Trump administration. We need our green tax credits. We need subsidies for these products. That's the damage that the Biden administration did, is he created this dependency, and he poisoned, the future of wind and solar. I'm not a wind and solar advocate, but I'm not a wind and solar adversary either. The marketplace needs to help them evolve. But now, are they going to evolve as proper institutions, as proper commodities with so much poison? They're not. No one knows what wind and solar are now, because wind and solar are tied up with the evils of the Biden administration and leftist nonsense. So he's poisoned the very industry he claimed to care about as well. The damage is going to take a while to undo.
Every time I talk to former Republicans or former Cato staffers around Washington, D.C., and they're starting something new. They're going to focus on finding bipartisan solutions and finding the path toward the middle. I always know that that's code for we're going to find conservative solutions for climate change, whether it's carbon credits or creating a market, as they claim. And it's all because the money is just flowing in. Is that still the case? It seems like a lot of these special interest groups, our Street Institute, wherever else, have over the last couple of years lost a lot of the influence they used to have in Republican corridors of power. They can't just walk into the Trump White House. They didn't build the bridges they need to. The corporations seem lost. Is that still a business model that flourishes and works? Are they just dormant now, or are they continuing to grow?
I think it'll be interesting to see how much those groups can still suckle off of the government teat, right? They can't survive without government dollars. But you're right. All of this bipartisan effort for climate awareness, for bipartisan solutions to fix the climate change is the slippery slope towards becoming a leftist, right? You're not going to get a conservative to first compromise on life or on flag burning but you slowly get them talking about how, what, you want your kids, and your kids have been hearing about this crap in school all day. That's how you start getting them. And then little by little, they start slipping. And then, I'm not saying I want women in men's sports and vice versa. I'm just saying we need to create a society. And now your conservative, quote unquote conservative, is now a RINO. And then pretty soon they're just Mitt Romney, right? And that's how the process begins. Climate is the gateway for that. And these groups, they're still out there. They're not dying anywhere. We've talked about this before from friends of ours who have worked in this space for a long time. I'm looking at you, Rick Berman, right? These groups don't disappear when their cause does, because they have 401ks, they have beautiful office space, they have premier parking. They don't want to give that up. So they're going to fight tooth and nail to keep their cause alive. because that keeps them in a very plush lifestyle. So these groups aren't ever going to disappear. That's why the only solution is to thoroughly defeat them. I have no desire on this Earth Day to reach across the aisle to talk to my climate change friends. I want to destroy them. I want to destroy their institutions and their organizations. I want to destroy their catechesis and everything they believe in, because there is no middle ground when you're dealing with neo-paganism and socialism. The only way we can survive is to thoroughly and utterly destroy them, and that's what I've dedicated myself to doing. Happy Earth Day.
I mean, if Rick Berman, if he's still active, man, he's been at it for a while. For those who don't know, he's the character who Thank You for Smoking was based on, a wonderful movie.
Yeah, he's fantastic, Turner, and he taught me a lot early on in my career about not having no compromise and having a backbone. And you know what? The left does this brilliantly. They do not compromise on gender. They don't compromise on abortion. You couldn't get Kamala Harris to give the slightest, she would tell Donald Trump at the debate, we don't believe that about abortion, but she would not put in any condition. She would not put in any limitation. The left does not compromise on their issues. And yet the right is always the one that tries to find middle ground. And Rick Berman taught me a long time ago, we are in a fight for these issues. And why are we going to compromise with the bad guys? And these are the neo-pagans, the climate activists, the Bernies of the world, the John Kerrys who are sipping champagne and condemning African children to work in slave mines to get lithium and cobalt. They are the bad guys, and there is no compromise with them. There is only defeat. So one of the things I love about Donald Trump as well is he has that backbone and that fight in him. We're both from Queens, so maybe I have a bit of that too.
What are some of the things that the Trump administration really does need to focus on in order to really pick that fight to the people who want to destroy American jobs, American energy independence?
Yeah, the clock is ticking for the energy dominance agenda. Now it's only been 3 months, right? So we're not at the threshold yet. But the sooner we get to, and we've already seen lower prices on oil and gas and food, and that's good. The sooner we get to a more sustained, low-cost economy, the American people will forget about the climate nonsense because they just want to survive, right? They're tired of how expensive things are. We just had tax week a couple days ago. I was complaining to you offline about the additional tax bill I got in addition to my tax bills. The American people are tired of life being so damn expensive. If Donald Trump's administration can show that he's brought this one thing, that robust energy, a robust American energy sector brings more affordable life, that's everything. And I know he will, and that's why I believe that thoroughly. I wouldn't be doing this otherwise. It may take some time to get there. He did it in his first administration, but if he can take the economy to that affordability point again, then be gone your stupid wind, your solar, your tax, your carbon credits, your carbon capture, your COP29, your John Kerrys, all of that crap goes out the window. Americans want affordable, quality life again, and energy will bring it.
Daniel Jenner with Power of the Future. Where can people follow you online and find some information about your organization?
Powerthefuture.com, or if you got a question, if you don't mind, Daniel@powerthefuture.com. Usually people email me after these interviews, and I love to have conversations with folks who have questions about climate or wind or solar or green or energy. So Daniel@powerthefuture.com. Shoot me an email, and I guarantee you I'll reply. If you're not just saying, like, you're a bald idiot, I don't like you, and I won't reply to that. But otherwise, I'll reply.